me to finish checking the tensile strength on the new chromium molybdenum alloy samples. Kid stood in my office doorway at 7:45 a.m., wearing a Navy suit that probably cost more than my head machinist makes in a month. That look young hotshots get when they think they just played their ace card against the old man. My name is Dustin Clark. I'm 46 years old, and until that exact moment, I was the founder and CEO of Atlas Steel Works in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We manufacture heavy construction equipment for infrastructure projects, the kind of machinery that builds bridges that'll stand for 50 years and excavators that can dig through Pennsylvania bedrock without breaking down. I set down my hardness tester real slow, the morning coffee still steaming in my Steelers mug. 20 years in Navy construction taught me to appreciate tools that perform exactly as specified every single time. The steel sample under my fingers felt right. Proper grade 440 chromally machined to within 0.001 inch of tolerance. That's the difference between a hydraulic cylinder that runs for 15,000 hours and one that fails when some contractor's digging a foundation for a hospital. Dustin, he said, not bothering with good morning or basic courtesy, we're letting you go effective immediately. The kid shifted his weight from one expensive loafer to the other, but kept that practice confidence they probably teach at Wharton Business School. His suit jacket hung loose across the shoulders, the kind of fit that screams trust fund but no real work experience. Board voted to move in a new direction. We need leadership aligned with global cost optimization strategies. Global cost optimization from a 29-year-old MBA who couldn't tell a grade 8 bolt from a grade 5 when he walked through our doors 11 months ago. Bryce had spent his first week asking our senior welders what the difference between MIG and TIG meant, like he was learning a foreign language. Now he was standing in my office talking about optimization like he invented efficiency. I could feel the familiar weight of my grandfather's steel-cased pocket watch in my vest, the same watch he carried through 35 years at J&L Steel back when Pittsburgh meant American steel, American workers building American infrastructure with American precision. I didn't pull it out to check the time. Didn't need to. Internal clocks still ran on Navy time after all these years. And who authorized this decision? I asked, voice level and controlled, like talking to a green seaman who just suggested using aluminum bolts on a steel frame. Calm but firm enough to make the point clear. I did, he said, chest puffing out slightly. Acting CEO gives me full discretion over personnel decisions. Acting CEO. Bryce Manning, fresh out of business school, where they hand out degrees like participation trophies and teach kids that everything can be optimized with the right spreadsheet. Before joining us, he'd worked at some private equity firm in Dallas, moving numbers around on computer screens and calling it strategy. Probably never felt steel shavings under his fingernails, or seen what happens when a weld fails because some contractor decided to save $5 on filler rod. His father, Warren Manning, owned 19% of my company and had been whispering optimization ideas to board members for months. Old-fashioned nepotism wrapped up in modern consulting jargon, like putting chrome wheels on a bulldozer and calling it a sports car. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built Atlas from nothing in 2009 with my business partner Rico Valdez, starting in a rented warehouse with surplus welding equipment that sparked like 4th of July fireworks. We'd spent our first 4 years working 95-hour weeks, living on coffee and determination, fabricating construction equipment to tolerances tighter than anything most people ever see in their entire lives. Back then, most small equipment manufacturers were still using welding techniques from the 1970s, trying to compete for infrastructure contracts with machines that couldn't handle proper stress loads. The big companies like Caterpillar and John Deere were starting to demand higher precision, but the smaller shops, the ones that actually built the individual components, they figured good enough was good enough. They were wrong. Dead wrong. And Rico and I knew it. Now, this kid, who'd never spent a day working with his hands, never seen what happens when a hydraulic cylinder fails because some MBA decided to save money on steel grade, was telling me I didn't align with the company's direction. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see the main floor where 150 good people were pretending to work while watching this drama unfold. Welders with 25 years of experience. Quality inspectors who could spot a stress crack with their bare eyes. Engineers who understood that when you're building equipment for highway construction, there's no such thing as close enough. Most of them had been with us since we landed our first major contract with PennDOT in 2011. Mike Torres at the welding station, still running beads with the same methodical precision Rico had taught him in his first week. Carol Johnson operating the plasma cutter that could slice through 2-inch steel plate like butter. These weren't just employees. They were craftsmen, people who understood that when a bridge excavator starts digging foundations with school kids walking overhead, every weld, every bolt, every component better work exactly the way it's supposed to work. You don't have authority to remove a founding officer, I said, still keeping my voice level. That requires formal board resolution documented in writing with proper advanced notice. He smiled, cold as liquid nitrogen. Board's already aligned on this, Dustin. We're moving production to Shenzhen. Cut costs 42%, improve margins substantially. This decision isn't up for debate. China. The word hung in the air like smoke from a hydraulic leak. I stood up slow, all 6 feet 1 inch of me. Shoulders square the way they taught us at Great Lakes Naval Training Center 25 years ago. He straightened up like he thought I might grab him by that silk tie and explain the facts of life to him up close and personal. I didn't. I'm not 25 anymore. And the best battles are won with precision and preparation, not brute force. Instead, I picked up my phone, slid it into my jacket pocket, grabbed my keys from the desk drawer, the ones with the little steel keychain Mike had welded for me in his apprentice days. A perfect miniature I-beam, every angle cut to specification. Through the office windows, I could see our people trying to focus on their work while sneaking glances at the drama unfolding behind glass walls. Understood? I said. His eyebrows went up just a fraction. Kid expected pushback, maybe some pleading or negotiating. Definitely some of that desperate scrambling older guys do when they realize their world is falling apart. Instead, I walked past him without another word, my work boots clicking steady rhythm on the polished concrete floor. Down the hallway, past the clean room where we assembled hydraulic systems for bridge construction equipment. Past the quality control station where every part got stress tested twice before it left our facility. Past the break room where someone had posted our latest DOT safety certification, the kind of paperwork that took months to earn and could disappear overnight if you started cutting corners. The elevator felt slower than usual. That weird time distortion that happens when your whole world shifts underneath you in the space of a coffee break. Not that I was panicking. 20 years maintaining CB construction equipment teaches you to stay calm when critical systems start failing. And I had a strong feeling the situation was about to get very interesting indeed. I walked through the lobby without stopping, past the display case with our company awards and infrastructure project photos. Betty Morse at the front desk looked up with concern in her eyes, but I just gave her a small nod and kept walking. No point making a scene or getting folks worked up. Not yet, anyway. My Silverado was sitting in the same reserved parking spot it had occupied for 14 years, right next to the employee entrance, where I could watch my people come and go every day. Good folks who understood that precision wasn't just about meeting specifications. It was about making sure some bridge doesn't collapse because somebody decided to save $50 on steel grade. I got in, closed the door, sat there for a moment with the engine off and my hands on the steering wheel. The parking lot was quiet, except for the distant hum of our welding equipment through the building walls and the sound of construction trucks rumbling past on the parkway. That's when I opened my laptop bag and pulled out the Dell that had been my constant companion through every major business decision for the past decade. Connected to my phone's mobile hotspot and waited for everything to boot up. Took maybe 40 seconds, long enough to watch a pair of hawks circling over the industrial district. First thing I pulled up was our corporate charter, the original document Rico Valdez and I had drafted at a Denny's on Carson Street back in 2009. We were both living on disability checks then, trying to figure out how 2 Navy construction guys could turn military precision into civilian paychecks. The coffee had been terrible. The fluorescent lights were flickering, but we'd written the foundation for everything that came after. I scrolled down to Section 7, subsection D highlighted in blue because I'd marked it 19 months ago when Rico told me he was ready to retire to Florida and spend his golden years rebuilding classic Camaros. No founding officer may be removed from their position without a 2/3 majority vote of the board of directors, documented in writing and delivered with 45 days advanced written notice. Bryce hadn't given me 45 days. Hell, he hadn't given me 45 minutes. I took a screenshot of the relevant section, opened a new email, and typed in the addresses of all 8 board members. Subject line: Charter violation requires immediate review. Body text, 1 sentence. Section 7D requires your immediate attention. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. sharp. Hit send and watch the message disappear into cyberspace. Then I opened the file I updated religiously every quarter, the one that tracked every single share of Atlas Steelworks stock from the day we incorporated. Every transaction, every option exercise, every share bought, sold, or transferred. the digital paper trail that told the real story of who owned what in this company. Rico had started with 43% ownership when we founded the company. By the time he retired last year, outside investors and employee stock options had diluted him down to 29%. He'd sold me every single one of his shares for $2.1 million, fair market value based on our most recent valuation, because he trusted me to keep the company true to the vision we'd built together. After Rico headed south to his garage full of muscle cars, I'd kept quietly acquiring pieces whenever opportunities presented themselves. Board members who wanted to diversify their investment portfolios, early investors getting nervous about infrastructure spending cuts, longtime employees who needed cash for their kids' college tuition or medical bills. I never pressured anybody, never played hardball or made lowball offers. Just made fair market deals when people were ready to sell. Warren Manning had been one of those early investors, coming in during our Series A funding round back in 2012 with $150,000 when we desperately needed capital to upgrade our welding equipment and expand our fabrication capabilities. Smart money, patient money. His 19% stake had grown nicely over the years as the company's valuation climbed from $9 million to our current $34 million. Nice return on his investment. Problem was Warren Manning apparently hadn't been paying close attention to the quarterly reports I sent out religiously, and his son Bryce definitely hadn't done his homework before walking into my office this morning with his termination speech. Because here's what the Manning family didn't know. By the time Bryce delivered his little cost optimization presentation, I owned 61% of Atlas Steel Works. 61%. Not 51%, not 55%, but 61%. In the world of corporate governance, anything over 51% gives you controlling interest. 61% gives you the power to do pretty much whatever you want without asking permission from anybody. It's nuclear-level ownership in a company that specialized in building equipment strong enough to move mountains. I stared at that number on my laptop screen for a long moment, then closed the file and started the truck. My phone rang before I'd even backed out of the parking space. Linda Frazier, my attorney since day one. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Never had, which was one of the reasons I'd kept her on retainer for 15 years. Just saw your email. What happened? Bryce Manning fired me this morning, I said, putting the phone on speaker while I navigated out of the parking garage. No board vote, no documentation, no advance notice. Just walked into my office and told me I was done. That's bold and stupid. I could hear her tapping a pen against her desk, the way she always did when she was working through legal angles. Linda had been practicing corporate law for 22 years, most of it representing small manufacturers who got pushed around by bigger companies or crooked business partners. She understood the game better than anyone. Gets better, I said. He wants to move all production to China. Cut costs 42%, improve margins. His exact words. Linda was quiet for a long moment. I could practically hear the gears turning. Dustin, you know what DOT regulations say about manufacturing safety-critical components overseas, right? I do. And you know what 61% ownership gives you? Nuclear-level control. You planning to use it? I pulled into traffic on Liberty Avenue, squinting against the morning sun reflecting off the steel mill buildings. Pittsburgh had been changing fast over the past decade. Lots of tech companies moving in, young professionals driving expensive cars. But the bones of the place were still industrial, still blue-collar, still the kind of town where people understood that making things with your hands mattered. I'm going to do what needs to be done. That's what I figured. Call me if you need backup tomorrow. And Dustin, yeah, don't let them see you coming. After hanging up with Linda, I drove to a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where they play jazz just loud enough to cover conversations, and nobody bothers you for camping out with a laptop for 3 hours. Ordered black coffee, no cream, no sugar, the way I'd been drinking it since basic training, and found a corner table where I could spread out my paperwork. First thing I did was pull up every document I'd need for tomorrow's board meeting. Charter violations, equity distribution reports, emails between Rico and me during the ownership transition, board meeting minutes from the past 18 months, everything that would prove Bryce Manning had overstepped his authority and violated corporate governance in about 6 different ways. But I also pulled up something else, our Department of Transportation contractor database profile, the one that showed exactly which infrastructure programs depended on components manufactured right here in Pittsburgh. Hydraulic systems for highway bridge construction, foundation drilling equipment for tunnel projects, excavator assemblies for dam maintenance, crane components for port facilities. Every single item on that list required strict compliance, federal regulations that controlled the manufacturing of safety-critical infrastructure components. The same regulations that made it illegal to manufacture certain bridge and highway construction equipment outside the United States without specific government approval that took years to obtain and could be revoked at any time for quality failures. Bryce Manning, MBA from Wharton, apparently hadn't done his homework on federal safety regulations. Kid probably thought .dot was some kind of internet domain extension. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text message. Final paperwork will be ready Friday. Please return all company property by end of week. I stared at the message for a long moment. Kid really thought it was over. Probably already mentally redecorating my office, planning his first all-hands meeting where he'd talk about modernization and efficiency and global supply chains. All the buzzwords they teach in business school to make cost-cutting sound like innovation. I didn't reply, let him think what he wanted to think. He'd find out the truth soon enough. Another message came through around 2 p.m. This one from Rico Valdez. He'd heard through the grapevine. Something's happening up there. You okay? Rico was living his retirement dream in Tampa, now spending his days fishing for tarpon and rebuilding classic muscle cars in his garage. But the construction equipment community was small, especially among the old-timers who'd built this industry from the ground up. Word traveled fast when a company founder got fired by some kid in an expensive suit. I called him back immediately. What the hell's going on up there, he asked. I could hear Lynyrd Skynyrd playing in the background, probably working on that 1969 Camaro he'd been restoring for the past 2 years. Bryce Manning fired me this morning, I said. No vote, no notice, no documentation. Just walked in and told me I was done. Son of a... The music stopped abruptly. He can't do that. Corporate Governance 101. Dustin, you know that. Gets better. He wants to move all production to China. Cut costs 42%. Improve profit margins. Rico was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had that edge to it, the one he'd probably used when some young seaman tried to cut corners on structural welding. Dustin, you know that kills every DOT contract we have, right? Safety regulations don't allow foreign manufacturing for critical infrastructure components. That's exactly what I told him. Kid looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You know what this really is, don't you? Rico's voice carried 25 years of experience dealing with corporate politics. Warren Manning sees dollar signs, thinks he can gut the actual manufacturing, turn Atlas into some kind of middleman operation, strip out all the expensive American labor, outsource the real work, keep the profit margins while the quality goes straight to hell. I hadn't thought about it quite that way, but it made perfect sense. Gut the manufacturing capability that made us valuable. Turn the company into a paper-shuffling operation that looked good on quarterly reports, but couldn't actually build anything that worked when lives depended on it. What do you need from me tomorrow? Rico asked. Just wanted to give you a heads up about what was happening. And maybe, I paused, thinking, maybe tune into the board meeting video call if you're not too busy with that Camaro. Rico chuckled. Wouldn't miss it for the world, partner. The next morning, I woke up at 5:15 a.m. sharp, no alarm needed. Internal clock never adjusted from Navy time and probably never would. Made coffee, scrambled eggs, sat at the kitchen table reading construction industry news on my tablet while I ate. Nothing about hostile takeovers or manufacturing outsourcing. Just the usual mix of contract awards and technological developments. The world had no idea that in 3 hours the future of a small but critical piece of American construction manufacturing was about to be decided in a conference room in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. By 7:45 I was showered, dressed in my best charcoal suit, the one I wore to DOT meetings and major contract negotiations, and driving through light morning traffic toward downtown. Conference room B was already occupied when I walked in at exactly 8:30 a.m. Bryce sat at the head of the table like he owned the place. Expensive gray suit, gold watch that probably cost more than most of our welders made in a month. Warren Manning sat to his right, stone-faced and formal in the way wealthy men get when they think they're about to close a profitable deal. The rest of the board was scattered around the table. Rico Valdez video calling from his garage in Tampa, wearing a Lynyrd Skynyrd t-shirt and looking like he'd rather be working on his '69 Camaro. Diana Palmer, our CFO, with her usual tablet and legal pad, taking notes on everything. Captain Morrison from Army Corps of Engineers, looking uncomfortable in his dress blues. Judy Cooper and Wade Foster sat together near the windows. Clearly Team Manning, probably already planning how they'd spend their consulting fees after the China move was complete. Sharon Beck was in the corner, nervous energy radiating off her like heat from an overloaded transformer. I walked in without knocking, didn't ask permission or announce myself, just strode to the opposite end of the table and set down my briefcase with enough force that everyone looked up from their coffee and documents. "Good morning," I said. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." Bryce leaned back in his chair, trying to project that same confidence he'd shown in my office yesterday. "Dustin, I appreciate you wanting to discuss the transition, but the decision's been made. We're moving forward with the restructuring plan. Have you?" I opened my briefcase and pulled out the folders I'd prepared. Because according to our corporate charter, Section 7, subsection D, no founding officer may be removed without a 2/3 majority board vote documented in writing with 45 days advance notice. I slid copies of the relevant charter sections across the table. "You gave me none of those things, Bryce, which means yesterday's termination was not only inappropriate, it was illegal under Pennsylvania corporate law." Warren Manning finally spoke up, his voice carrying that practiced authority wealthy men use when they think they're in control. "Dustin, Bryce has full authority as acting CEO to make personnel decisions. Acting CEO appointed by whom?" I looked around the table slowly. "Show me the board resolution. Show me the documented vote that gave him that authority." Silence stretched across the room like a stress crack in steel. Judy Cooper shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Wade Foster suddenly found his coffee cup fascinating. Captain Morrison cleared his throat. "Warren, did the board actually vote on Bryce's appointment? Because I don't remember that meeting happening." "It was understood," Warren said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence, given our strategic direction discussions over the past several months. "Corporate governance doesn't work on understandings," Diana Palmer said, looking up from her notes. "It works on documented decisions and proper procedures." Time to play my ace card. "There's something else you should all know," I said. I opened the second folder and pulled out the equity distribution report I'd updated the night before. As of yesterday morning, I owned 61% of Atlas Steelworks. Dead silence. Diana picked up the document first, scanned the numbers, and her eyes went wide. She passed it to Captain Morrison, who studied it carefully and slowly shook his head. 61%, I repeated. Acquired legally over the past 7 years through fair market transactions with willing sellers. Every purchase properly documented and filed with the state. Bryce's face had gone pale. "That's impossible." "Is it? When's the last time you actually looked at the quarterly equity reports, Bryce?" "When's the last time your father looked?" Warren Manning snatched the document from Captain Morrison's hands, studied it for a long moment, then set it down like it might explode in his face. "This changes nothing," Judy Cooper said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The board still has oversight responsibility. The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders," I said, "and the primary shareholder is sitting right here." Sharon Beck spoke up for the first time. "What does this mean for our people, for the 150 families that depend on this company?" I turned to her. "It means no China, no layoffs to cut costs, no compromising safety standards for short-term profits, and no outsourcing American manufacturing to foreign countries that don't have to follow our safety regulations." Rico's voice came through the conference room speaker, tinged with satisfaction. I moved to reverse Dustin Clark's termination and restore his position as CEO of Atlas Steelworks. "Seconded," Captain Morrison said immediately. "All in favor," Rico called. Hands went up around the table. Rico voting remotely, Morrison, Diana, Sharon. 4 out of 8. I looked at Judy and Wade. "You're both smart business people. You understand what 61% ownership means in corporate governance." Judy raised her hand reluctantly. Then Wade Foster. 6 votes out of 8. Bryce slammed his palm on the table. "This is ridiculous. You can't just motion carries," Rico interrupted from Tampa. "Dustin, you're officially reinstated as CEO of Atlas Steelworks." Bryce looked at his father, waiting for support that never came. Warren Manning was still staring at the equity report like the numbers might change if he looked at them long enough. "Fine," Bryce said, standing so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Keep your little company, but you're making a mistake. Manufacturing is going global, whether you like it or not." Maybe I said, checking my grandfather's steel-cased pocket watch, but not on my watch. He stormed out, leaving the conference room door standing open behind him. Warren Manning followed a moment later, pausing only to look back at me with something that might have been respect mixed with resignation. 2 months later, I was back in my office when Linda Fraser called with news I'd been expecting. Warren Manning wants to sell his remaining shares, she said. All 19%. His lawyer called this morning. What's he asking? $6.1 million. Fair market value, no hard feelings. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the shop floor where our people were fabricating components for a new highway bridge project we'd just landed. If I bought those shares, I'd own 80% of the company, enough to ensure no outsider could ever threaten what we'd built again. Make the offer, I said. 3 weeks after that, my son Jake called from Penn State, where he was finishing his mechanical engineering degree. Dad, I've been thinking about that job offer you mentioned. Is it still open? I watched Mike Torres training a new welder on the TIG torch. The same patient precision Rico had taught him years ago. The kid was learning that when you're building equipment for bridge construction, there's no such thing as close enough, only perfect or failure. The offer's open, I said, but you should know we're not just building construction equipment anymore. We're proving that American craftsmanship and American workers still matter in a world that thinks everything can be outsourced to the lowest bidder. I know, Dad. That's exactly why I want to be part of it. That's when I knew we'd won something bigger than a boardroom battle. We'd preserved not just jobs or contracts, but a way of thinking that values quality over cost-cutting, experience over MBA theories, and building things that last over quarterly profit reports. The union guys on our floor had started calling me Steel Man Clark after word got around about how I'd handled the Manning situation. These were good people who understood that when you're building the infrastructure America depends on, every weld matters, every measurement counts, and cutting corners isn't just bad business, it's dangerous. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's simply refusing to let someone else define what your life's work is worth. I learned that day what every man past 40 eventually discovers. Real power comes from understanding the game well enough to protect what you've built with your own hands and passing that knowledge on to the next generation who'll carry it forward long after you're gone. The steel-cased pocket watch in my vest kept ticking, steady as American manufacturing should be. And now, with Jake coming home to learn the trade and 80% ownership locked down tight, I knew it would keep ticking for another generation of Clark men who understood that some things are worth fighting for. And that's the lesson every working man learns eventually. The guy who signs the checks isn't always the guy who owns the company, but the guy who owns the company always gets the last word.